On September 14th, Alexander Adams of Bournbrook Magazine wrote an article titled "Line Up for the Based Draft." The short piece discussed the recent announcement of mandates in the United States from the Biden administration in respect to inoculation against a certain disease and the reaction to it. As a feather in the cap to Mr. Semiagog, Mr. Adams linked the stream he hosted about the recent announcement and how to respond to it, as well as what happens next, that yours truly had the privilege of being a panel member on. One of the items that we discussed on stream was the concept of the based draft, as proposed by the blogger Spandrell. Today, I wanted to explain the original concept as coined by Spandrell, and then examine what Alexander took away from its meaning and its concept. Links to Semiagog's stream, Spandrell's blog post, and Adams's article will be in the description. Spandrell's concept of the based draft comes from a blog post of his on February 18th of this year. He references the life of Ying Bu, a general of Xiong Yu during the Chu-Han contention in the late 3rd century BC. What happened to Ying Bu was that his enemies sent an envoy to their camp, loudly announcing falsely that the good general had surrendered to them. This had enraged his leader, and he was forced to leave and abandon his original command and post. Spandrell, in his knowledge of ancient Chinese history, calls his strategy of the base draft pulling a Ying Bu. From there, he writes the following passage, quote, "We need to run a massive, complete, society-wide Ying Bu on every single non-bio-Leninist person who is still working for the enemy. We can define the enemy as the wider left, which includes our governments and corporations known to have helped the left, either with money or with influence. The point of the Ying Bu story, henceforward stratagem 33B, is that we need to find a way to deny our enemy the use of their best human capital. And not only that, we must do it so that our enemy sends their best human capital to our side. And we do that by implying that they are disloyal to the government side. All of them." End quote. Spandrell advocates taking away the best and brightest away from government, bureaucracy, NGOs, and other avenues in both public and private sectors, specifically those that the media and the endless barrage of Longhouse HR managers love to call out: whiteness. Rather than fighting back against CRT, lectures on white privilege, and blatantly discriminatory hiring practices, Spandrell wants the process to accelerate with open arms, for the consequences are favorable to regime collapse. He writes, quote, "Bio-Leninists at your company or department are already agitating to get your place and have you fired. I say let them. Let's see how the federal government in Globo Homo manages to even function without white men. I really want to see it. Now, of course, most white men won't leave. They need the money. They have mortgages to pay and kids to provide for. I get that. But guys, they're after you anyway. So I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. But you gotta join our side. And sooner rather than later. You may not want to. You might be afraid. And we get that. But we're not gonna give you the choice. You're being drafted." End quote. While daunting in its request, the basic premise is simple. They will eventually come for you, no matter how much you might want to serve the regime. So why not leave now and watch it end before your very eyes and prosper with us? This, at the heart of it all, is the concept of Spandrell's based draft. With a better understanding of the original concept, we can now take a look at the short commentary from Alexander Adams from Bournbrook Magazine, who most assuredly had to read Spandrell's blog in order to get what we were referencing on stream. So hey, another neoreactionary writer being exposed to the actual named individuals out there? But I digress. The article begins in discussing the recent executive announcement about certain mandates being put out throughout the United States, and the likelihood that termination will be a high probability for those that refuse inoculation or testing. Alexander writes, quote, "A group of conservative and neo-reactionary commentators gathered online to discuss the prospect. At first sight, the law's impact appears grim, with the prospect of many people losing their jobs and homes or being forced to undergo an experimental medical procedure under duress. However, the commentators agreed that in the medium term this might help their cause and lead to a based draft, that is, an influx of based, conservative, Christian, skeptical, traditional individuals into partnerships and small companies that would strengthen their opposition to the state." End quote. I do have to admit, asking someone to define what based means other than the usual based on what beam is rather comedic in its attempt to translate internet political jargon to the normies. Yet I continue. Alexander then explains the importance of the Pareto principle and its political form, and how this might affect their ability to resist what he calls the authoritarian biosecurity state. Adams's key takeaway from our discussion was that mandates may very well be the catalyst for people to band together, and form independent small businesses, becoming individual contractors or consultants, to evade the 100 employee threshold as laid out in the mandate. He writes, quote, "Consider the impact of a law which separates the young, healthy, independent, brave, evidence-led, assertive young people from others and classes them as a distinct political group, the dissenters or dissidents. I imagine the attraction of joining that membership of that elite, productive, motivated individuals who are forced into a political alliance to survive. That the dissident elite might have a founding myth, known enemies like the state, large companies, the mass media, and most social media companies, and the constant social pressures to bond and work together." End quote. Adams, like many of us on that stream who look somberly and soberly onto what lies ahead, remains potentially optimistic to what's going to happen next. Even if the state's lawfare and what remains in our vestigial form of federalism fails, there is a chance to survive, thrive, and carry on. Alexander concludes with his commentary with this, quote, "Biden's based draft could provide the practical impetus for the formation of a dissident elite, which could ultimately be more productive, resourceful, and formidable than a complacent, lazy, and submissive population ruled by a vast bureaucracy crippled by woke rules, affirmative action, and burdensome client groups. Line up here to check out of mainstream society and enter a tight-knit group of hard-working dissidents." End quote. Alexander Adams has taken Spandrell's original idea, wherein those of us on the right would have to place pressure on the non-bio-Leninist members of the cathedral out and onto our side against the regime. Adams argues that the incompetency and power-grabbing nature of this current administration might just be the necessary push for them to come on over, especially when an overwhelming number of healthcare workers, nurses, and other key industry officials are faced with these mandates, as well as contracted entities like that at Raytheon. The future, as oftentimes with the best predictions, models, and assumptions, can end up absolutely incorrect, and is unknown in regards to this specific policy. But as the pot continues its slow boil, slowly, and then suddenly all at once, the more and more we should take action, and enact the based draft. Thank you all for watching, glad that you can make it to the end, and an extra thank you to the wonderful people on screen here who make this stuff possible. If you would like to join them on screen, and join me on Sundays to talk international relations, the link is in the description. Be sure to share the video, and I'll see you all next time. Be prudent, everybody.